Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. So here we go again. It feels like every single time Caitlyn Clark misses a game or the Indiana Fever pick up a win without her, the exact same conversation starts all over again. Suddenly, the headlines become, are the Fever better without Caitlyn Clark? Then it turns into, should the Fever trade Caitlyn Clark? We've seen this cycle before, and now it's back once again. My answer is simple. No, the Indiana Fever are not a better basketball team without Caitlyn Clark. Can they still win games without her? Absolutely. Can they completely change the way they play and become competitive for stretches? Sure, but those are two completely different conversations, and that's where the nuance gets lost. The Fever play an entirely different brand of basketball when Caitlyn Clark isn't on the floor. Without her, they slow the pace down, rely more heavily on half-court offense, and try to grind games out through defense and physicality. That style can absolutely win games against weaker opponents. It can even surprise a few good teams over the course of a long season. But is that championship basketball? I don't think so. That's the biggest difference that keeps getting ignored. Winning a couple of regular season games and building a team capable of competing for a WNBA title are not the same thing. If someone wants to argue the Fever are genuinely better without Caitlyn Clark, then that same logic has to apply elsewhere. You would also have to argue that the Atlanta Dream are somehow better without Angel Reese. That simply doesn't make sense. Nobody honestly believes Angel Reese makes her team worse, just like it doesn't make sense to argue Caitlyn Clark makes Indiana worse because they won a few games without her. The reality is much more straightforward. The Fever become a completely different basketball team whenever Caitlyn Clark isn't available. They play like underdogs. They try to slow everything down, make every possession ugly, and drag opponents into close games. Against weaker teams like the Sparks, that approach can absolutely work, but it's much harder to evaluate because you're talking about one of the league's weaker opponents. Beating a struggling team doesn't suddenly erase everything Caitlyn Clark brings to the floor. People also keep bringing up last year's Commissioner's Cup. They'll say, well, the Fever won the Commissioner's Cup because Caitlyn Clark was injured. But that leaves out a lot of important context. Before reaching that final, Caitlyn Clark missed games and the Fever struggled badly. They lost to the Dream by 20 points and nearly lost to the Washington Mystics as well. Then Caitlyn Clark returned, and suddenly the team ripped off 3 straight victories. That part of the story always seems to get skipped whenever this discussion comes up. Can the Fever survive without Caitlyn Clark? Yes. Are they built to compete for a championship without Caitlyn Clark? That's an entirely different question. There's also another interesting wrinkle to this conversation. When Caitlyn Clark is healthy but resting on the bench, the Fever often struggle without her on the floor. It's almost like there are two completely separate basketball teams wearing the same uniforms. One version plays through Caitlyn Clark. The offense moves faster, the ball movement changes, transition opportunities increase, and everyone plays a different style. The other version plays through Stephanie White's system with Kelsey Mitchell taking on much more offensive responsibility. That's not necessarily a bad team. In fact, it's a solid team. It's simply a different identity. The problem is you really can't commit to both identities at the same time. Now let's talk about something people don't like discussing, and that's the salary cap. If you completely removed the financial impact Caitlyn Clark brings to the franchise, there actually is basketball logic behind asking whether a trade would make sense. That's not because Caitlyn Clark isn't great, it's because the Fever are heading toward a difficult salary cap situation. Kelsey Mitchell is approaching free agency, and keeping everyone together becomes extremely difficult. Caitlyn Clark's salary increases, Aaliyah Boston's contract grows, Lexi Hull's contract increases, Raven Johnson's deal adds more money. All of those numbers begin stacking together, while the salary cap doesn't grow fast enough to match them. That leaves Indiana facing some very difficult decisions. If Caitlyn Clark were traded, which I don't think will happen, you could potentially keep Kelsey Mitchell while also receiving valuable draft picks and inexpensive rookie contracts. Again, that's basketball math, not necessarily what the franchise should actually do. Financially, it makes almost no sense to trade the biggest star in the sport. Caitlyn Clark has transformed the Fever's business, television ratings, ticket sales, merchandise, and national attention. That's why I don't believe Indiana seriously considers moving her. The bigger issue is that previous contract decisions involving Monique Billings and Lexi Hull have limited flexibility moving forward. Those deals have made roster construction much more complicated than many fans realize. Even draft picks aren't a perfect solution anymore. Look at the Golden State Valkyries situation. Teams are reaching a point where even first-round selections become difficult to pay under the current salary structure. That's why Indiana finds itself in such an unusual position. Then there's the atmosphere surrounding these games. Reports from people inside the arena suggested that although plenty of tickets had been purchased, attendance wasn't what many expected. That's another reminder that ticket sales and actual game day crowds aren't always the same thing. Now we're entering another week without a Fever game, which means these debates are only going to get louder. People will continue asking if Ty Harris should start over Caitlyn Clark. No. People will continue saying one victory proves the Fever should trade Caitlyn Clark. No. People will continue pointing to one performance against a struggling opponent and pretend it answers every question surrounding this franchise. It doesn't. Rhyne Howard had an inconsistent game, while Janelle Salon played well. Natasha Howard also had a strong performance. Those are legitimate basketball observations, but none of them suddenly change what Caitlyn Clark means to the Indiana Fever. At the end of the day, Indiana isn't one basketball team. They're almost two completely different teams depending on who has the ball and what system they're running. One version revolves around Caitlyn Clark's pace and playmaking. The other revolves around Stephanie White's structure and Kelsey Mitchell's scoring. Both versions can win games. Only one has the long-term ceiling to become something special. That's why these trade Caitlyn Clark or the Fever are better without Caitlyn Clark conversations always miss the bigger picture. Winning a regular season game without your superstar doesn't prove you're a better team. It simply proves you adapted for one night. And over the next several days, don't be surprised if these debates completely dominate the conversation, because that's exactly what happens whenever the Fever win without Caitlyn Clark. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads.
When?
Dogs for Breezy birthday.
Woo! Don't do the chat, baby. You know what it is. Don't in the chat.
Silent. Silent. Y'all know what it is.
Dub, 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 dub. Dubs in the chat, as they say.